Welcome to Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, brought to you by Byrne Production Services. Here, we explore the different ways business events can bring value to your organization, the latest technological advances in the event space, as well as providing you with actionable strategies to make a business event a success. Let's create an exceptional event experience.
Welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the business events podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Kim Washington, a dynamic global event talent and branding leader at the National Basketball Association. Kim has been reshaping the landscape of sports and entertainment events since 2012, where she climbed the ranks of senior manager to events director, renowned for her visionary and innovative approach to event management. Kim, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you. So let's start with some of your backstory. How did you get to where you are today? And, take me through the beginning of your career and how it led to this.
Well, the funny thing is, I was supposed to be the next Oprah Winfrey. At least that's what I thought. I was a journalism major in college. I attended the State University of New York College at SUNY New Paltz. And I entered in as a journalism major. In my sophomore year, that's when they gave us a beat, and I hated it. I did not like having to chase stories. I liked to write, but did not like having to chase stories. But I still liked being in the communications world. So I changed my major to communications and kept journalism as my minor. Went on to get my master's degree at Syracuse in media management. However, my first job coming out of grad school was at WFN Sports Radio. And I worked in sales. Wasn't crazy about sales. But the interesting thing was anytime we had an event, I did like that part of my job. So I left WFN Sports Radio and I ended up working for a company called Allegheny Energy as a business manager. And then I left there and got a job working at American University. What my understanding was I was going to be a resident director. What I did not know was during the summertime, we would be working with conferences. So that was my very first introduction into the event world, was working with conferences at American University. And so doing that for 3 summers, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I think having a great boss too, Chris Moody, thank you, because he's the one who introduced me into this world. That made me want to explore more. And so eventually I did move down to Georgia and I got a job working at the Omni Hotel at CNN Center as a conference services manager. And there I learned a lot about different aspects of events altogether, because I was sort of I was the main contact for the client, and then all the different touch points with the different aspects of the hotel, whether it was sleeping rooms, meeting space, working with the AV company, working with outside AV companies for load in, load out, anything like that, exhibits, conferences, meetings, social events. I had an opportunity to have my hands touch all of those. After that, I did have a goal. I wanted to have an opportunity to open a hotel. And I also wanted to work at a convention hotel. And the opportunity presented itself. And so I ended up working at the Gaylord in National Harbor, Maryland. And I opened that property. And I also worked there as a convention services manager. And so it did fit within the next set of goals that I had. So after that, I did move back to Georgia. I spent a lot of time moving up and down to Georgia. And I moved back to Georgia. And I freelanced for a while, and then I took on a job with a destination management company. At the time, the name of the company was GEP Atlanta. And so that gave me an opportunity to introduce me to the world of transportation, doing dine-arounds, more social events, more of the production side of events. And then I left and went to Morehouse School of Medicine and was their director of events there. And that was more, I would say I started to learn more about the production side, doing run of shows, working with talent, more social type events, a couple of conferences here or there, but it really was more focused on the social side. And so after that, in 2012, interestingly enough, I went to a PCMA conference And I had met someone who worked in the events department of Nike. And I said, I had one of my really good friends, she was there too, Akina. And I said to her, I said, I would really love to work for Nike. I said, but I don't want to move to Portland. And I literally said it just like this. I said, I think I'll go work for the NBA. My mind was thinking Atlanta Hawks. I was never, ever thinking the league office. And that same summer, I was watching the Olympics and I said out loud, I said, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'll be there in 2016. I said, I have no clue how that's going to happen. So come October of 2012, I was working for the NBA. And in 2016, I did make it to the Olympics and worked that event as well. And so I have been with the league ever since.
That's amazing. I like how you were just like manifest destiny. Like, I am going to do it, and then it happened. That's fantastic. So, Kim, managing large scale events often involves sort of high pressure situations. Could you show me how your leadership style adapts to on-site events to maintain team morale and efficiency?
Well, in terms of adapting, it's the first thing I have to do is take a step back if there's a situation at hand and think it through. Because I've also learned from experience that if you don't do that, you might end up making the wrong decision. There are times where I have called colleagues and I literally have talked through the whole situation while they're listening quietly. They have not said a word. And then I say, okay, I think I've got it. Thank you. So it's different ways. But as far as adapting in high pressure situations, it depends on the situation. It depends on who's involved. You can't manage every situation or every person or every team the same exact way. You have to find a way to adapt to that. And so once I figure out that piece of information, then I can determine how to move on. But the one thing that is really important when trying to problem solve is that you have to try to remain as calm as possible, because energy is something that is easily transferred. So if I'm all over the place, that energy is going to transfer to other people.
Yeah, you're so right about that. There's a lesson that we all learned that I have a theatrical background, and one of my stage management teachers once told me that the cast will react 10 times better or worse depending on how you react. And I think you're touching on that. Do you have like a specific example of where adapting that leadership style on site led to a turnaround in team performance or an event outcome?
Well, I'm pretty good at reading a room and reading people in general and sensing whether something's going well or something is not. There was an event. There was just a lot of challenges in different areas with that particular event. And the folks that I was working with at that time for that particular event, it was a struggle. They really had a lot of struggle. And I actually had to dig back into my resident director days, because I do have a residence life background, to figure out how to help navigate all these different issues and how people were feeling, because we're so far away from home. We're on the road for a long period of time. What can I do to make them feel supported? So it became more of an individual one-on-one conversation type situation with different people, because they were each facing a different challenge. And so I always like to say, I remember during this entire experience, there was one person who was just walking so fast. And I said, hey, slow down. I said, you need to take 5 minutes for yourself. And the person turned to me and said, I don't have 5 minutes. And I said, no. I said, the world is not going to end if you take 5 minutes for yourself. I understood things were super busy, but if you don't take time to take care of yourself, then you're no good to yourself or the rest of the team or to the event itself. And the person verbalized some frustrations about what was going on. And we had a conversation about maybe creating some boundaries. But the individual was not sure how to go about that, because the thing is, and I know we're probably jumping into another area, when a person is facing a difficult situation, they're not sure how to create the boundary or how to address the matter. In this particular case, they felt like they were being disrespected. And so my advice to them was, perhaps you should address the individual about that matter, because if you don't, it's going to continue. I don't think the person did that, but at least what I made clear to the individual was understand that I am here for you. If you need anything, if you need guidance or advice, and just that you have support. And that was kind of the message that I kept giving throughout that particular event. So it was one-on-one conversations, different situations, and saying, okay, here's what we can do. Would you like advice? In some cases, I do ask that because it depends on the individual. Sometimes they just need an ear, and other times they are looking for some kind of solution. And so I adapt according to the situation at hand and to the people who are involved.
Right. And so, you sort of just touched on this a little bit, that, events can stretch over long hours and even days. And so in your experience, how do team dynamics evolve during the course of an event? And what strategies are you implementing to keep your team cohesive and motivated throughout?
Well, there's two different places that I go. One is utilizing the 5 love languages. Many people think that it has to do with relationships, but it actually can be implemented in the workplace as well. And another area that I tend to go to from my way back in the day training days is the color exercise and understanding how that person thinks. And so the love languages is more about how that person feels appreciated or how you let them know that you appreciate the work that they're doing. The color exercise for me is more about, okay, how does this person operate and what's the best way to help them? Because I'll give you an example. For example, with the color exercise, green folks tend to be analytical, blue tend to be emotional, gold, and I'm very much a gold person. Primarily, we just like it when you just cut straight to the point. And orange people are action oriented. I do feel in the event world, orange people, we all turn orange at some point in time because we have to just jump in and get it done. But I have people who I work with who are gold like me. So I know if I'm going to deliver a message, I just have to shoot it straight, just get it off my chest and just say it. There are other people who are more blue, who have to go through the river and the woods and tell the entire story. So I have to sit and wait because if not, I'm going to disrupt their thought process and I won't get to the bottom of whatever the issue or the situation is. And then with green folks, they're very analytical. They don't see black and white. It's a challenge sometimes to get them to understand that there's some gray when we are in this world. You do have to mix those colors sometimes and make the gray. And so I use that.
I really like that sort of, and maybe I'm a gold person as well. I'm not 100% familiar with the system, but I really like the processification. That is the worst English ever, but the process of being able to understand sort of a good category of how people are working together, and I like how you've sort of set this system in place to be able to quickly assess and go, okay, who am I talking to? How am I talking to them? What support do they need? I think that's brilliant. So the demands of managing high-profile events can encroach on personal time. How do you balance the intense work periods of event management with downtime? And how do you encourage your team to do the same?
Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I will sing that until it is time for the good Lord to take me home. It took me a while to really understand what it is to set boundaries in place. I learned that 2 jobs ago, that it's important to have boundaries. Now, but you also have to be flexible with those boundaries sometimes, because when leading into an event, when it gets really, really busy, you may have to be flexible with those boundaries. But if we're not leading up to an event, I do kind of keep things to a certain extent where after 5 o'clock, I'm not looking at emails. On the weekends, I'm not really checking my phone. But if we're leading up to a major event, absolutely, I do have to do that. And I understand that. People have learned, especially at my current job and my last 2 jobs, that boundaries is something that is very, very important to me because that is how I keep my sanity. But I do recognize, even though I preach it all of the time, I do recognize that a lot of individuals are not comfortable within their careers yet or comfortable within themselves to start creating those boundaries. And I've said it before in team building exercises. I've said it before in front of everyone that I've worked with. I said, When people begin to set those boundaries, you cannot get upset with them because they're doing they're doing is best for themselves. And for me, I make myself very available when it's necessary, but if I need to create time where I'm not available, I will do that. But I also will let people know that I'm not available. And if I'm not available, I'll let them know who they can go to. Sort of like my out of office kind of situation.
Yeah, I think, whether that's on site or even in your sort of day-to-day pre-production, I think people not setting those boundaries can sometimes lead to a lot of apprehension and a lot of tension within teams. And I'm sure everybody listening has probably experienced that they're, at home with their family and there's a couple of emails coming in and everybody's sort of expecting an answer. And because you haven't set boundaries and to your point, communicated those boundaries to the rest of your team, then it's no wonder that they're going to encroach on this boundary if you haven't told them that it's there. And so I think that sort of leads into, giving some practical advice for anyone listening on setting and respecting those boundaries for themselves individually and for the team during extensive pre-production on-site and to prevent burnout or any of that tension in teams.
Well, first thing, take a moment for yourself. Sit back, try to assess the situation, figure out what's important, what the priorities are, and then you can go from there. If you can figure out what the priorities are, if you need to create time and space for yourself, even though it is a busy situation, it's okay to me, in my eyes, it is okay to say to a colleague, if it's necessary, hey, listen, I need 15, 20 minutes. I need to go for a walk. I need some air. I just need to take a break. And people have said that to me, and I don't have a problem with it because sometimes when you're working an event, you're never leaving the venue. You're staring at, for lack of a better term, four walls. So to me, I think it is okay to say that. It's okay to say, I need some help. It's okay to say, I need a break. It's okay to say, I need a moment. Because when you say those things, or if something's getting to a point where you're feeling uncomfortable and you say the words, I need a moment, that's doing a couple of things. That's buying you time to assess the situation and buying time so that the other person can take a minute and step back too. Because sometimes in the heat of a moment or the heat of an event or if things are starting to ramp up, if neither one of you take a minute to step back, that could be a recipe for disaster. Not for the event itself, maybe, but for between the two of them.
I like the contextualization of the give and take in that, right? That and I don't know if this is your experience, but I'm sure I have experienced people feeling like I need a minute, to paraphrase what you were just saying, is a take. Like I am taking that away from my team. But you're phrasing it as you're also giving your team time to their minute as well, right? That it's a two-way street. That when you say to yourself, "Hey, I need 15 minutes to go take a walk, get a breath, get out of these four walls," you aren't just taking that 15 minutes. You're also giving that 15 minutes to other people, and I think that's brilliant.
Well, to be honest, when you spend so much time together with groups and the teams change, our groups, the people who I work with, the groups do change from event to event. But when you spend so much time together, at some point in time, you do need a break from each other. So there may be a night where I don't go out to dinner with the group or I decide to do something else. So that is how I keep myself sane, honestly. Because there's so much going on and then you have different people pulling on you for different reasons. You have to kind of take time for yourself. If you don't, it's no good.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I love that concept of that take is also a give and shifting that sort of pressure that people might put on themselves to not take because I feel selfish in that give, like that take is also a give. So can you discuss a time when you had to mediate a conflict on site and what were the strategies that you used that resolved it effectively? And, just to give some dimension, after resolving that conflict, how did you ensure the same issues didn't come up in future events?
Well, the conflict really wasn't between people. There are situations where there have been conflicts with individuals, but it was not my place to get involved. I've had individuals who have had conflicts with each other who both have come to me. But I also am known to kind of be like Fort Knox. If it comes with me, it stays with me, it doesn't leave. And so only if I'm asked to get involved, which I've never been asked to get involved, but I do, they're coming for advice, or they're coming for me to be a soundboard. As far as conflicts in the event world, we did have a situation where we set up a session for content where we're going to record content. And the hotel, we had everything set up, ready to go. And the hotel came to me and said, "Oh, we just wanted to let you know that we have a dance party that's going to be taking place next door." Okay, yes, that doesn't work we're recording content. And so I remember leading up to the event, I kept on asking, what's happening in this space? Is anyone coming up? And at least 2 weeks out, nobody was in that space. So I found out that the event was booked 2 weeks out. And I said, if you had come to me, you would have learned that we weren't using the other ballroom on this day, and the group could have gone into that space. And so, the director of events of that particular property just kind of looked at me, and I literally said, I do not care what you have to do. I don't care if you have to dig into your S&P budget, which is sales and promotion. I said, either way, that group is moving. We are not. They have to go. So they did end up moving the group. I know that they had to pay for everything because the other group's AV was already set up. And so I was holding them accountable because you knew that this was coming. You waited until we were on site when we're getting set and ready to go to say, oh, in a few hours, this is what's happening. And you also knew at least 2 weeks out that we didn't have anything scheduled into the ballroom on that particular day. So to me, it was about just using common sense and saying, you know what, maybe we should ask if we could put them downstairs since they're going to make so much noise. I don't see them using the ballroom. And so that was a conflict. And ever since then, even though I always do ask about what's happening in spaces around the event that's taking place, I'm more in tune with it and ask it more and more and more. And so we did go back to that same property. And this time there were several events that were taking place. And one of the women who I work with was asking a lot of questions about what was taking place, when it was taking place. And so it worked out better this time around. And a lot of having to play nice in the sandbox, because the other thing that they did this time was they contracted the ballroom with the other group, but then we had the foyer space. Then it was a wedding. So having those conversations and constantly going back and forth and learning to play nice in the sandbox, that is how we try to resolve conflict.
Excellent. So managing events, especially large scale ones, can be a marathon and not a sprint. How do you keep your team's performance high from start to finish, especially when you're on site for really long periods of time?
I tell them to get out, because leading up to it, there's time. There's time at some place. Or I should say at some point in time, there's time to get out, whether it's going out to dinner or if we're in a new city or another country, doing some kind of expedition or something like that, or excursion, doing some kind of excursion, just getting out. Because one of the things that I realized, it took me a minute, and we'll talk about it some more later, but it took me a minute to realize you have all these opportunities and you're traveling to all these great places, but you're doing nothing but work. What do you do to keep your sanity? And so whenever there's an opportunity, I always say, get out. We don't have to go out together, but get out. Or if it's towards the end of the event, or if the event is over, come on, let's go. The last one that I did, I said, let's go out to lunch. And we went and we walked to a local place for lunch. In other cities or countries, I remember one person came to me, and it was her very first time doing an event with us. In another country. And she said, I'd really want to do this excursion. Would you be okay? And I was like, go. I said, I'm here. Like if something happens, I can cover it. I said, please go, because you don't know if you'll be back. So when we're on the road for long periods of time, it's really important to keep up the morale. And I do work with some high energy people, but at some point, all of us do hit a low point. We can't keep up that high energy forever. But I work with some and have worked with some really great people who I feed off of their energy sometimes, because sometimes my energy does get low. And there's other times where my energy is a little too high. And then sometimes, it just depends on the day. It depends on the situation. We're all human. Work is not the only thing we all have going on. We have things going on outside of work too. So that can also affect the way that we're feeling. So I try to be conscious of that.
And so are there any specific indicators that you watch out for in a team that signals that it's time to take that step back?
I can see it on a person's face. If I know that they're not good at hiding how they're feeling, I could see it in the way that the work is being handled. If I know that you are a high performer and things are starting to slip, that's when I know something is going on. It may not even have anything to do with the work at hand or the event or the job. It could be something outside of that. Do I need to know all of that personal information? No, not necessarily, but I do let it be known. If I see it, I'll talk to that individual and just say, is everything okay? And I'll ask that question. And it's up to them to decide whether or not they want to share.
Okay, so with your sense of experience in managing international events, how do you ensure that cultural sensitivities are respected with diverse teams, especially when they're from various parts of the world and working closely together on site?
It's so funny because someone said to me yesterday that I'm in tune with, and I'm aware of different cultures. Well, where I currently work right now, whenever we do travel to a new market, they do have cultural training. So that is something that they do provide. Sometimes in the beginning, I used to research stuff a lot on my own just to understand certain things. But now I guess because I've been doing this for so long, a lot of not most, but a lot of the cultures are in certain regions are similar. There may be certain nuances. So I have a better understanding with it these days. But just being aware of where I am and the culture that I'm around. And if there's something that I know, I do try to share it with the folks that I'm working with. Or if I learn something new, I'll point it out. Or if they learn something new, they tell me. But I try to be sensitive to the country that I'm in and try to be aware that certain things that I may do that is normal here in the States may be offensive over there. So I try to understand those nuances.
And so can you discuss is there any specific innovative technologies or tools that you found particularly effective in managing your teams on site to help set those boundaries or to track time? Is there anything that you're using specifically to be able to help you in that management and leadership? Let me say this, I'm not a micromanager. I do believe that I am surrounded by people who are very capable, for the most part. One tool that I always encourage people in my particular group to get is an iPad. That was a game changer for me. When I had a Samsung tablet and then I dropped it and it no longer worked. And someone from IT said, I think you should try an iPad. And I was like, no, I don't like the iPhone. I can't stand it. When I got the iPad, it was a total game changer. And what it did for me, it made things more flexible. There was a lot of traveling I was doing at one point. There was a lot of things that I was doing back to back to back. But I remember being in Paris and, in Europe, they tend to eat dinner late. And I didn't want to have to come back to the hotel close to midnight and have to do additional work. As crazy as this sounds, I was sitting at the dinner table with my iPad getting stuff done. I've been in South Africa. I'm in Johannesburg on a bus getting stuff done. And so that for me is a game changer. And so I encourage a lot of people to get it, because the one thing I always say, you don't have to be tied to your laptop to get work done. And if you're trying to create that work-life balance, if you're not like for me, if I'm not driving and I can get something done when we're in a market and we're on the way somewhere, I get it done on my iPad. And so that is probably the biggest tool I advise anyone to get. I love any type of communication technology that can go cross device like that. And I think, to touch on what you're saying, because of that flexibility. And I think that people sometimes feel a pressure to, oh, I just got an email on my phone. I need to go open my laptop and deal with this. But if the technology stack that you're using allows that flexibility and that functionality across those different devices, then you're right. It creates such an ease of use that the cognitive load on trying to deal with whatever just popped into your phone, if you can just do that in 2 seconds by responding quickly with a yes, no, I'm going to do that tomorrow, or whatever that response might be, rather than, oh, I got to go over to this thing and turn it on and go log in and figure it out and then deal with it. So now I'm thinking that this thing is going to cost me all this time. So I love that idea of using available technology to be able to sort of balance those boundaries and put boundaries around the task. I think that's brilliant.
So, and my favorite app, some people love it, some people hate it, but SharePoint, oh my gosh, that's a game changer when you can carry all your files with you on the cloud. And so if something is needed or someone needs something, you can quickly download it and send it. And so some people love it, some people hate it. I do firmly believe eventually we're completely moving to a cloud-based storage system eventually at some point in time.
So looking back over your career, what advice would you have wished to have received about managing teams and to make that maintain that work-life balance when you first started? And is there a piece of advice you'd followed throughout your career that's been particularly impactful in shaping how you manage teams?
As far as I would say with team management, managing a group or a different dynamic, I think it's really important to understand the individual, because you cannot lead everyone the same exact way or manage everyone the same exact way, because if you do, you're not going to get the best out of them. I've worked with people who need words of affirmation. They need to understand and hear you say you appreciate the work that they do. And then they feel happy, they feel fulfilled that you're acknowledging what they're doing. Other people, and of course, I'm touching on the 5 love languages. Other people, they feel appreciation through gifts. That's my primary love language. Show it to me in my pay, I'm happy. But even or acknowledging, quality time. Sometimes, and I could be needy like that sometimes with my own manager, where it's like, I just need time. I just need some time with you so we could just talk through some things. Or even some people are happy with just a high five, which is the physical touch. Feel like physical touch. Yes, I know people think that's strange to say that could be applied in the workplace, but I'm talking about a high five, or a handshake or something like that. So it's important to understand that, or understand how they function, how they think, because I can't approach everyone the same way. I used to do that when I really didn't know much about managing people or managing a team or working with a group dynamic, and it blew up in my face. And so when I started the training, when I worked at American University, I was being trained on how to train the RA staff and the summer staff. And so learning all those different techniques and the team builders and everything else, that's what opened up my eyes to understand you cannot manage everyone the same way. You cannot manage a team the exact same way, because everyone responds to things differently. And if you want to get the best out of them, you have to understand how they're going to respond and how they function.
So we always like to close these episodes out with a practical tip, knowing that, event organizers and planners are listening to this episode. What practical tips or steps could a listener take to start setting up those boundaries within their teams? Just to go on the boundaries. I think that was the thing that we wanted to concentrate
on. See, and I've been told this several times, not everybody thinks like me. So I think a couple different things, and it depends on the individual and it depends on the situation. But if there's a struggle with setting boundaries, I suggest that you talk to someone who can help you set those boundaries in a healthy way, whether it's through a therapist, a career coach, someone who can help walk you through how to do this in a way that it's healthy, so that people, because no matter what, when you set boundaries, people, especially if they're not used to you having them, you will have some people who will be bothered by it. But to me, they just have to get over it. But getting that proper guidance on how to set those boundaries, but then also the person has to be comfortable and be ready to do so. I could tell people all day long, you need to set boundaries, but until that individual is comfortable enough within themselves and they're ready to set those boundaries, like, there's no sense in jumping into it if you're not comfortable doing it, because there will be some type of backlash coming from an individual or two, and that's just at least that's what I believe, that is just part of it. And eventually that person will just get over it. You're setting the boundaries for yourself, and to maintain your own sanity.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kim, for joining me today on the podcast. And where can people reach out to you if they want to connect?
Well, I am on LinkedIn. I can definitely be found on LinkedIn. I do have an Instagram page. It's a long name. It's n_artist_with_no_name. That is my IG. But I definitely, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to find me. And that's the easiest way to contact me.
Great. Thank you very much, Kim.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To find out more about Byrne Production Services and how putting on events can drive value for your business, visit byrneproductionservices.com. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Production Value Matters, thank you so much for listening.